What's up everyone, and welcome to this Figma crash course. Whether you're a complete beginner or you've already played around with Figma, there is something in it for everyone. As usual, you have the Figma file in the description below so you can follow along with me, and you also have a link to Figma if you want to sign up. Let's jump in. Let's start off by understanding the structure of a Figma. If I go into my Figma homepage, and this can be on the app or on the browser, it really doesn't matter, whatever you're more comfortable with. So on the panel, you will see your teams. So you see I've got 3 teams over here, and you can have an unlimited number of teams even if you are on a free account. Inside the team, you will have projects. So you see I have my projects just down here, and you can also see them over here. If I click on a project, you'll see I have loads of files. And then if I open the file that we're in today, some files will have multiple pages. So this one just has page 1, but you can add multiples if you want. Now that we're back in the file, let's look at our next thing, which is just looking at the design file in general. So on the left and the right of our canvas, we have some sidebars, and in them we have some different panels. On the left sidebar, we have the layers panel, which is where we have all of our layers. Basically everything that's on the canvas will be written down in this panel. And then we have the assets panel, which is where we have any reusable assets that we've either brought in from a different file using a design library or that we've created on this file. Next to it, you have a little drop down to see the pages if you have any on your file. If we look at our right sidebar, we have design and we have prototype. So we're going to get to prototype at the end. We're going to look at some basic prototyping in Figma, but design is where the magic happens. Okay, this is where you will be doing everything in your files. If you don't select anything, it will just look like this, but the second I select something, you'll see that I have loads more properties, and we'll get to that in just a second. You can use some shortcuts to swap between the panels. So if I use option 1 and 2, I'm swapping between layer and asset, and if I use Shift E, I swap between design and prototype. I find Shift E really, really helpful. And speaking of shortcuts, I am a huge shortcut fan, so you will see me talk about them quite a lot, but these are some of the main ones that are really important to know. If at any point your mouse changes to something else other than a pointer, just click on V to bring that back. And in terms of zooming in and out, you can use Command or Control plus and minus. You can use Command Control and then the wheel on your mouse if you have one, which I would really recommend. Or you can just pinch and zoom on your trackpad. All right, diving into our first big topic, and that is shapes, images, and the design panel. I really like to start people's Figma journey by just looking at some shapes and how you can change their properties. So I'm going to go in my toolbar. Over here you'll have a shape tool, and there's a little drop down, and there is a rectangle. So when you insert anything into Figma, you can do it in a few different ways, but let's say I select my rectangle tool, I can just drag to create my rectangle, but I can also, I'm just going to Command Z to undo that, click on R to get the rectangle tool and tap in, and that will bring in an 100 by 100 pixel shape. So I now have this shape, and you can see when I move it around, I get these little red lines that kind of tell me that I'm aligning to other objects. And let's start looking at our design panel. So over here at the top, you have some alignment tools, which we'll get to in a second, but below you have kind of the transform section of the design panel. You have the X and the Y position, which I can change by just writing in something else, or I can use my arrow keys to move it, and you can see how it's moving in the canvas as well. If I hover over the letter, I'll get a scrubbing tool, so I can hold it down and move it, and it will just scrub like that, which is pretty cool. And you can do that to the X or the Y. Underneath you have the width and the height. So again, I can use my arrows, I can scrub, but I can also use simple maths. So for example, if I need it to be twice as large, I can use an asterisk and then a 2, and it will just multiply it, which is incredible. So first top tip, anywhere that you can type numbers into in Figma responds to math. Now, next to the W and the H, I have this constrain proportions button, which is incredibly useful. Right now, the proportions or the ratio is 1:1, right? Because this is 100 and this is 100. What that button does, it means that if I change this to 50, the height will change as well. So it retains whatever proportions you have set on there. Underneath, we have the rotation, so I can change it to, let's say, 45, and then I have my corner radius. I'll just make this a bit bigger. I have my corner radius, so let's say 5, and you can see those corners kind of change, and I also can control individual corners from here if I want. So I can make one of them 10, one of them 30, and one of them 0. Yeah, I just use tab to move between the different ones. Now, everything that we can do from the transform section of the design panel, we can also do from the canvas itself. So if I zoom in, you'll see I get these little handles. If I select them and drag in, I'll change the radius. And if I hold down Option or Alt while I'll do that, I'll only control one of the sides. So you can see only that side was affected. Now, if I hover over the corner, you'll see I have the rotation tool. And if I start rotating, it will just move. If I hold down Shift, Shift is kind of the magic key. Shift will let me rotate in 15-degree angles. So it keeps us a bit more exact. Even though I have the constraint proportions button selected, if I try and make this shape bigger, you see that that's kind of broken, right? It's not 1-to-1 anymore, even though this is still selected. If I do want to keep the ratio, remember our magic button, if I hold down Shift and I just drag, you see that it keeps the same proportions as it was. Even if it was more of a rectangle, let me just unconstrain 200 and 100 and I hold down Shift, it will keep that proportion. So Shift is really magic. It's also great if I'm dragging. You see now I'm not really dragging in a straight line. If I hold down Shift, you see now it's in a straight line. It can jump out, but it's harder for me to make it jump out. So the next shape I want us to look at is an ellipse. So I'll select my ellipse tool or click on O on my keyboard and just tap in. Then when I zoom in, I have just one little handle, and that is the arc tool. So if I select it and drag up, you see that I get 3 new sections in my transform panel, and I also have 3 handles over here. So this is just to really easily create like a pie chart or anything like that. So I have my sweep, I've got my ratio, and I have my starting point. And remember, because anything that you can write numbers into responds to math, you can actually do some calculations here if you need to create a really exact chart. And of course, everything that we learned from the square is still here. So you can still control width, height, corner radius, and the angle. Let's look at our next shape, which is a polygon. So if I look at it, it looks like a triangle, but it's not. It's a polygon. And let's see why. I have 2 handles over here. The top handle controls the radius, and then the bottom one is a count. And you can also see it in the transform section. I've got these little dots. If I hold it and then move it up or down, I'll be adding more points, and that's why it's a polygon and not a triangle. So I can make it as many points as I want, and the bounding box is big enough for that. So the bounding box is this blue square that's around it. You see that it's not actually touching the bottom of the triangle. That's because it's kind of expecting more items. Let's look at another shape. So we've got the star. If I tap on that, it's going to be kind of an amalgamation of everything we've seen so far. So we've got the radius here at the top where I can control the radius. Then I have the ratio to control the corners that are going in. And then I have a count, so I can control how many points. And all of these also exist on the transform section of the design panel. So we've looked at some shapes. Now I want us to play around with giving them some more properties. I'm going to drop in a rectangle again, clicking on R and just tapping in. We've looked at the transform section. We're going to look at constraints later. Let's have a look at layer for a second. So layer is blend modes. You might be familiar with those from other design tools, from Procreate on the iPad or anything like that. Layer blend modes, usually you will only see a difference when there's something kind of interacting. So if I put my rectangle just over my star over here and I hover over the different blend modes, you can see that how it kind of affects it. So see, for example, exclusion does that, or hue, saturation, luminosity, not much happens. They're also the same color. If you want to play around with blend modes, you can. I don't really use them that much. Underneath, you've got the fill. Now this I use a lot. So this is where we just select the fill color of our shape. The default will kind of always be this lovely gray color, D9, D9, D9. And like with everything in Figma, we can change the fill color in like 5,000 different ways. So if I tap on this little square, I will get the color picker. And in the color picker, I just have a normal color selector as you would see anywhere else. I can also type in the hexadecimal. I can change this to an RGB, CSS, HSL, HSB, whatever you're comfortable with and you want to be using. You also have the ability to add a gradient fill. You also have the ability to add an image or a video, which is super cool, especially for prototyping. I can also use an eyedropper tool to pick up a color from anywhere else in my design. By the way, another top tip, if I click on my shape and then click on eye, I will get quick access to the eyedropper tool and I can just change the color without even having to click on that little picker. Now I can add multiple fills. So if I click on plus, you can see I can add as many as I want. And then I can also move them around. So if I grab this and drag it down, the gradient is underneath the full color. If I change the opacity, kind of might be able to see that it's there. Yeah. So that is the fill color. Underneath, we have the stroke. Now, stroke is just a fancy way of saying border. So you can see now that it has a black border around it. The selection of the color of the stroke is exactly the same as the fill. You can also have a video or image inside of the stroke, which is something really cool. You can do really fun things with that. And then underneath I have the width of the line, so I can just make it a bit wider. Then let me show you, if I zoom in a bit, you will see what this one does. So the default for the stroke is always going to be inside, but if I want to make it outside, you can see that the bounding box is here and the line is outside, and I can also make it center. So you can see that the bounding box is in the center. If you're designing something that goes into development at the end of the day, just make sure to be aware that center and outside are not the defaults anywhere really, so you kind of need to highlight that to whoever's getting your designs. But they're super cool to use. Great thing that's been introduced to Figma pretty recently is that you can control the individual strokes. So I can say, I only want a stroke on the top or on the left, or if I select custom, I can decide for each side, what is it actually going to be? Now in the 3 dots, I've got some advanced settings. I can make it a dashed line, and then again, I can select really detailed things like how big is the dash, how big is the gap, what kind of dash is it. I can select how the joints look, and I can even set it to custom, which means that every dash can be a bit different. I can set how much is each dash and each gap, and they don't have to be the same. So you can do some really fancy things with this. I can also, like with fill, add multiple strokes on top of each other. Let's look at effects next. You've got 4 types of effects in Figma. We have drop shadow, inner shadow, layer blur, and background blur. Now background blur is the only one that doesn't really happen to the shape itself. You'll only really see something happen if there's something behind the shape, but let's have a look. So the drop shadow is kind of our basic drop shadow. You will see already that there's a bit of a drop underneath this shape. And if I tap on this sun, you will get all of the information here, and I can change it, can make it to this side, or if I want to change it to the other side, I'll just use a negative number. So you see it goes over there. I can even change the color, so it can be like a pink drop shadow. Inner shadow just does the same thing inside. So it took all the properties that I changed for drop shadow and just put them inside. So that's really cool. And then we've got layer blur, which just blurs the layer itself. So you can see it's just on a 4 and it's already quite a strong blur. Yeah. And then background blur, like we said, it will look like nothing is happening. If I put it on top of something else, you will start to see what it does. It doesn't make it opaque, but you can still see kind of what's going on behind it, yeah? And if I make this a bit stronger, you will see a bit more of that. Also, this will only happen if you've got opacity on your fill. If my fill is on 100, nothing will happen, but if it's on 90, you will see a bit of that. Now with effects, like with everything else, I can make a few effects at the same time. So I can have a drop shadow and a background blur and a layer blur and an inside blur if I want. All right, moving on to our next bit of the design panel, and that is using the alignment tools. Alignment tools are my favorite thing in the world. People don't use them enough, and people really don't appreciate the value of a well-aligned design file. The alignment tools sit at the top of our design panel. If I just select one element and use the alignment tools, it will align that element to whatever parent it sits in, to whatever container it sits in. In the layer section, you can see that I have this frame, and inside of that frame, I have all of these things. So if I select this guy, for example, this vector, and I align it to the left, it will just align itself to the left of the parent that it's in. So to the left of the frame. If I align it to the center, it will go to the center, center, top, etc. But usually we'd use the align tools to align an element to another element. So for example, if I move this one here and I want the orange one and the red one to be aligned to each other, if I select both of them and then let's say align top, it will always go to whoever's kind of most extreme in that direction. So if I align top, it will look at who's more top right now, and that's red. If I tap on that, both of them will align at the top of red. So if I just bring them back here, and let's say I want to align all of these elements to each other, and I want to align them to their vertical centers. So I'll just click over here on vertical centers. The keyboard shortcut for this is Option V. So I'd really recommend remembering that. They look good, but they don't have the same gaps between them, right? It's a bit weird. I can also distribute their horizontal spacing. If I go into this kind of extras menu, I have distribute horizontal spacing, and now look. They are equally distributed. Once I did that, you can see a few things. Firstly, I have these little pink circles. If you can't see them, just zoom in a bit. I have these pink circles, and I also have this section, the transform panel, and that is telling me how many pixels of spacing there is between each of these people. So I can change it to 10, for example, and they'll go quite close to each other. I can make it 30. If I hover in between, I'll see these little lines, and I can also change it from here, make them on negative spacing, I can make it really big, really small, whatever I want. And if I hover over one of these circles, I can also replace the items within, which I think is something super, super powerful that I've not seen on any design tool before. So we've seen how to align objects, we've seen how to distribute them, but we've only seen this on a single axis, right? It was only distribute horizontally or distribute vertically. But Figma is amazing. We have a tool called Tidy Up. So if I select all of these elements at the same time and hover over them, you will get these 9 little squares at the corner. If you don't have these, it just lives inside of here. If I click on Tidy Up, boom, look what happens, okay? It tidies everything up on the 2 axes. And now you can see I have both the horizontal and the vertical spacing here, and I can change it. So I can say I want 25 pixels between them over here and 50 over here. I can change it as well from the canvas like before, and it keeps that equal spacing. Yeah, so it's really, really, really cool. One last thing that's amazing with alignment. Remember that red man from the start that he could align himself to the whole frame, to the parent? What if I want all of this kind of structure of the people, first name and surname to be in the center of my slide? So if I align them to horizontal centers and to vertical centers, they just align their centers to each other. And that's not what we want, right? I'm just going to Command Z. So what we can do is we can align them as a group. And we're going to use our magic key, Shift. So if I hold down Shift, straight away you can see that the alignment tools changed, right? So now if I hover over it, it will say align horizontally to frame. If I click on that, it will align all of them and align all of them. Yeah, so magic key, Figma's amazing. Moving on. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is text. Don't skip this. I know you wanted to skip this. You were like, text is boring. Text is not boring. Text is important. So let's just select this text over here and look at the text section in our design panel. So to start off, we have the fonts. Figma just introduced this where when you hover over a font, it will show it in the actual space and see it change without you having to select it. You also have this really fantastic drop down where you can see, let's say, only the fonts that you use in this file. So if you're only using a few fonts, you can get quick access to them. And you also have Google fonts, popular fonts, or variable fonts, or fonts that were installed by you. So this is really, really useful. Then some fonts are font families and they have different kinds of widths like bold, extra bold, black, extra light, etc. Next to it, you have the font size. There are some set font sizes here, but I usually just type into here. And like before, I can use maths here. I can use my arrows. By the way, if you hold down Shift, magic key, while using the arrow, the nudge amount is larger. So you can see if I just use my arrow, it goes to 25, 26, so it nudges by 1. But if I hold down Shift, it nudges by 10. Underneath, you have the line height. So the automatic line height is usually 150% of your actual font size, but you can change it if you want. It's going to show you, for example, for right here, 400. So you see how that's 400 times the actual font size. That's usually not what you want, so I'm going to change it to automatic. Next to it, you have the letter spacing, which I love to use letter spacing to make things a bit more interesting. Underneath, you have paragraph spacing. You'll only see this change if I have 2 lines of text. So it spaces kind of the paragraph. It's not the letters themselves. The letters are still small, so it's not the line height. It's just the space between the lines. Then we also have, if I make the text box a bit bigger, we have our normal kind of text alignment. So we have left, center, right, top, center, and bottom. We also have some advanced settings over here. You can have text decoration, you can have case, so you can set that no matter how I type things in, they will always be uppercase or always lowercase or always title case. This is super useful. This is pretty new. You have a vertical trim. So right now my line height gives us a bit of breathing space, but if I use vertical trim, it will just to the text itself and just stay that way. You also have line style, which means that you can create bullet points or numbering, and you can change the list spacing as well if you want more breathing room between your bullet points. So up till now, all of this was pretty straightforward and probably familiar to you from other design tools, but this is the point where I need you to listen in, because this is my biggest pet peeve in Figma, is when people don't know how to use the resizing tools for text. Let's have a look. I have some text here that you might be familiar with. I've got the alphabet and I'm missing a few letters. So I want to show you the 4 different resizing modes for a text box in Figma. Let's start with the default. Little asterisk, this is only the default setting if you actually insert the text box correctly. So listen up. So auto width, you can see it over here, the 3, and then the 4th one is in the advanced settings. What auto width does is it says Figma is in charge of the width of this text box. If we look at the top here, the width and height are grayed out. I can't change them. So if I click into here and continue my alphabet, you see that that keeps growing in width, right? And it will forever grow in width until I click on enter and start a new line. Let's change it to auto height. If I change it to auto height, straight away you can see that the width is now controlled by me. Figma is saying, you do this, okay? I'm not going to interfere. And if I continue typing, TUVWXYZ, you see what happened? It wrapped the text around because I told it the width is 207. It can't make the width larger because I told it to stop at 207. So if I keep typing, you'll see it will just wrap it and I'm not clicking on enter. I just keep on typing and it wraps it. Let's look at our third one, which is fixed size. When I click on fixed size, you can see that straight away I control height and I control width. If I keep on typing, look what happens. The text box stayed the same, but I have text outside of my text box. Yeah, that makes no sense.
No.
So if I try and select the text that's over here, you see I'm double clicking and I'm just highlighting it, but I can't actually tap inside. If I do that here, you see I get the cursor, I can start typing, but I can't do that here. There is no way for me to select this text. So this is a recipe for disaster. Fixed height is useful sometimes, but it's only useful if you decided to use it. And this is why this bit is so important. If you select the text tool from the toolbar or click on T to get it, and you drag to create a text box like you would in any other design tool and start typing, you have created a fixed size text box, and that will mean that it could be much larger than your text or much smaller than your actual text. And usually you don't want that. So best practice is get your text tool and just click and start typing. That way you get your auto width. And that is kind of what you want. We want to leave it up to Figma as much as possible. One saving grace for fixed size is our fourth resizing type, which is truncated text. So if you click on the extra options and then go into truncate text over here, look what happened. So it's saying, this is the size of the text box. This is what we've got. If you want to create some text outside of it, that's fine, but I'm going to truncate it. I'm not going to show it. I'm going to add an ellipsis. So if I make this text box smaller, you see that it keeps truncating. If I make it longer, it will accommodate for that space and you won't have a ... anymore. And that's the same if I grew it in height. Yeah. So the second it had space to show that extra line, I don't have an ellipsis anymore. So resizing is super, super crucial. And we now know that we're going to click to create a text box and not to drag. Don't be a drag. Don't drag. Great slogan. Yes. All right, moving on to our next topic, which is super unique to Figma, and that is frames. So what is a frame? A frame is just a container, okay? So a frame can contain things inside of it. A frame can be alone. It could be the whole screen that we're designing. It can be something inside of the screen that we're designing. It's kind of endless. To create a frame, you just select it from the toolbar, or you can click on F to get it. And then on the right hand panel, you will also get some kind of presets of frames, and they are usually the sizes of all of the digital things that people usually create on Figma. So iPhones, tablets, desktops, presentations, watches, paper, anything you need. There's also archive if you are designing for an older device. But as usual, you can just drag or click in to get a 100 by 100 pixel frame. When I drop in a frame, you can see it's like this hashtag symbol in the layers panel, and I can nest frames inside of frames. Like you can see here, frames intro is a frame. Inside of it, I have this tag, that is a frame, and then I have this frame, that is a frame. Now, you might be thinking, why do we even need frames if we can group things together? You might be familiar with groups from other design tools that you use. And let me show you why. There's three key differences. So I have these three hearts over here, so I'll select all three of them and I'll put them inside of a frame. You can see in the design panel that they are now in a frame. And I'll select these three and I'll just group them. So right click and group selection. Hearts. So in the layers panel, a frame is a hashtag symbol and a group is a dotted square. Technically, these feel very similar, right? I can select all of these and move them together. I can select all of these and move them together. These are contained, these are contained. First, different. Frames can have properties, groups can't. So if I select this frame right now and I add a fill color to it, and I'll make it black. By the way, don't think I said this before. In the fill, when you're selecting a color, you can just write in the name of any basic color and Figma will just pop it out. So you can see what happened, right? The frame took on that color. Okay, so the frame says I can have properties, I can have a background color, I can have rounded corners, I can have whatever you want, so I'll be black. If I click on my group though, you can see that already there's a difference. It says click plus to replace mixed content. First bad sign. If I click on plus, ooh, what happened? Yeah, so instead of taking on that new fill color, it just changed the fill color of all the elements inside of it. Not what we wanted, right? So that's difference number one. Difference number two is along the same elements. Frames can change size without affecting the elements inside of them or their children. I'm gonna say parent and child a lot. So parent is the container, like the frame, and anything inside of it is the child. So if I select the frame and just drag from the corner here, you'll see that the hearts are like, and I don't care. Again, frames can have properties. It could be big. Groups, however, no. The last difference is that frames can live on without anything inside of them. Okay, so if I open them here in the layers panel, I'll just select all of my hearts. I'll drag them outside of the frame in the layers panel. So you see now my black line is kind of inverted inside of the frame. But if I bring it out, it's outside and the frame lives on. Yeah, it's still here. But if I do the same thing to the groups, if I drag them to be outside of the group disappears. Yeah, the only reason the group was there was to group these items. So if there's nothing to be grouped, why am I there? Some more about frames. Frames can have constraints, properties, layout grids, be an auto layout, clip their content, do so many things. The one thing a frame cannot be is a shape other than a rectangle. It could be a fake circle. So if I put in a frame, click on F, tap in and make it black, tap in 0. I can give it like 99 rounded corners and it looks like a circle, but it's not a circle. It's a rectangle with rounded corners. Now let's look at clip content. So we have a frame over here and inside of it we have an image and we have some text. Now we can already see that this text box is bigger than the frame, but I can't see all of it. And that is because if I look at my frame in the transform section, I have this tick box that says clip content. If I untick it, I can suddenly see everything, yeah? So frames allow you to have things inside of them that are not within the frame kind of viewport. So if I unclip this again, you will see I can only see what's inside this 323 by 203 kind of viewport. If I make the frame a bit taller, suddenly I can see everything, right? Now this is great if you need to design for a specific screen size and you need everything to be inside of there and you'll put some scrolling on it later, but you want to see what is the actual viewport, right? What is going to be above the fold, if you will. All right, moving on to our next bit of the design panel, and that is constraints. This is where we put our concentration hats on. Constraints can be a bit tricky to understand, and I'm not gonna lie, unpopular opinion, but you can live your life without ever using them. But you also should use them. Yeah, okay, we're talking best practice here. You should be using them, but you can also not use them. But I think they're fantastic, okay? Once you understand them, they can be super useful and really up your design, especially if you want to be designing in a dynamic environment. So let's have a look. I have 4 frames over here. Inside of each frame, I have a rectangle and some text. Now, when I look at an element that sits inside of a frame, it will have constraints in the design panel. The default constraints are going to be left and top. And you can see that here it has a blue line, blue line. It also says left and top. And also you can see those blue lines in the actual frame. Now let's look at this one. This rectangle is set to center and center. You can choose it from the drop down or just from this kind of visual representation. This one is set to left, right, and top, bottom, and this one is set to scale and scale. Scale is the only one that doesn't have those blue lines anywhere. So you can see this one has lines all around, this one has a cross in a center, and this one has nothing. If I select all of these frames, I'm going to make them a bit bigger. You can see how the rectangle inside reacts when its parent changes size. So left top is, if we look at those lines again, it kind of gives us a clue. Left top says, I only care about what's happening to the left of me and to the top of me. I don't care what's going on anywhere else, yeah? So if I select this frame and pull it from that side, you can see how the yellow box goes with it. But if I move it from here, nothing's gonna happen, right? Center, on the other hand, says I'm gonna stay in the center of my parent. So if I make this a bit shorter, a bit longer, it will just stay centered. Left, right, and top, bottom does is it kind of looks at those differences between itself and its parent and sticks to them. That's all it cares about, right? So it says when I started my life, I'm gonna make it smaller. Let's say over here, they were 100 pixels. All I care about is maintaining that there will forever be 100 pixels between me and the right and between me and the left of my parent. So even if it grows a lot, it will grow. It says, I will grow to keep those 100 pixels alive. Yeah. This is super useful when you want to create like a navigation bar or a tab bar, because if it started its life with 0 pixels between the right and the left, it will forever stay 0 pixels right and left. So if the screen stretches, it will stretch with it. Now, scale is a bit of a weird one because it scales however much its parent scales. So it does the math on its own. It says if this grew by 5.9, I'll grow by 5.9 or whatever that is. So the difference here does change. It's not the same as left, right, top, bottom. It doesn't keep the same pixels, but it changes them according to how much it needs to change them. Yeah. So these constraints are great. You can also obviously use combinations. You can use, let's say, right and bottom or right and scale or anything that you need to fit your exact purpose. Next thing I wanted to look at is styles. You might have heard about components and variants and variables and all of these different reusable assets that Figma has to offer. We're not going to get into those in this video because this is more of a simple video, but styles are a reusable asset that is really simple to create and just makes your life so much easier and makes you look super profesh as well. So let's say in my design file, I'll always use the same colors and I want those colors to be saved so everyone can just pick them up. If we're loads of people on the same file, everyone can just look for that color rather than having to remember the hexadecimal. That's what styles are for. Now, styles are just reusable properties. They can be colors, they can be text, they can be effects, and they can be layout grids. Let's save one color together. So I want to save these 4 colors into my design file. I've already selected some colors for myself, but feel free to change these around if you want to. If I select this box over here, in my fill section, you see that I have these 4 dots, and this is where styles live. If I tap on it, I have no styles yet, right? But I want to save this into my file. So I'll click on these styles and then click on plus. Now, when you do that, and this is super important, you want to make sure that you've got style selected and not variable. After I select that, I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to call this primary because this is my primary color. I can also give it a description, but I don't want to for now. Simple as that. If I click on my canvas now, under local styles, you will see that you have a color style and that style is called primary. Now this box is already using that, okay? Let's do the same thing with secondary. Click on my styles, click on plus, change it to style, and type in secondary. Now, why are these incredible? So firstly, I've saved these, right? So if let's say I'll select this text over here and I want to use one of my styles on it. If I click on style, I have them over here. So let's say I select primary, there we go. So firstly, it makes it super, super simple to keep selecting the same colors and reusing them. But what's also amazing about it is that it's super dynamic. Let's say this color's now changed, okay? I've decided that I don't want to use this purple color. I want it to be green instead. If I just edit the color style, you can see that I can already see the 2 elements on my page that were using that style have now changed to my new style, yeah? So it just keeps you super, super protected. Now, if you want to be really organized, which I love, you can use a slash to create a folder. And that's a top tip for you in Figma as well. Anywhere that you have a slash will automatically create a folder for you. So if I add this black as a new style, and I'll call it label / primary, you will see that when I click on my canvas, suddenly I have this little drop down, okay? Let's do the same with secondary. So I'll click on plus, label / secondary, and it recognizes that I already had a folder called label, so it puts it inside. It doesn't create a new folder. And then if I click on my text again, and now I don't want it to use just primary, I want it to use label primary, you can see that I have a little header here that's telling me that I'm now in a different folder. Okay, you can also change the view from a grid to a list. And I can also search. So let's say I just want to see the label colors. If I type it in there, I will see those over there. And by the way, like with normal fills, within the style, I can also add multiple layers of fill. It doesn't have to be just one fill color. So you can have an image and on top of it, something else if you want. Let's save some text styles now. So if I click on my title, I already have it set to urbanist, bold, and 25, but you can set it to whatever you want. I'll click on my styles and add a new style. I'll just call it title, for example. And I'll do the same with my body. I'll select it and add one called body. If I click on my canvas again, you will see I have text styles and then color styles. Now, in the text style section, you will see you have the font size and then a slash, and then it will say auto for me because my line height is automatic. But if my line height was something else, it would say something else there. Something really cool as well is that the A and G are written in the correct font. So if I change my body text, for example, to be like this fancy font, you can see how you can see that represented over there. Now, last thing that you need to know, if you are using a style, you can only change to a different style. But if you want to now just select a new color, all you need to do is to detach the style, and then you get the normal color picker. It doesn't mean your style doesn't exist anymore. The style's not canceled. It just detaches it from that specific element. All right, so we've learned so much up till now, and now is the time to practice. So I've already put in a few screens for you, but we're going to add a product page. So what happens when you tap on one of these shoes? What do you see? And then we're also going to prototype it all together using some scrolls and some fancy things. So let's get started. The first thing I need to do is to create a frame, right? Because I want all of my elements to be inside of a frame. So let's see, what size is this one? It's 390 by 844. So I can click on F. I believe that that is one of the iPhones, isn't it? Yeah, that's iPhone 13. So just tap on that, it brings it in. Then I want to change its name. So I'll double tap where the name of the frame is and just write shoe page. Lovely. Now, what do I need to have in my shoe page? I think the first thing I want to have is just an image at the top, right? So in order to do that, I'm going to click on R to get a rectangle, and I'm just going to drag a rectangle. Let's see, the width is 390, so I'm probably going to want the height to be 390 as well. So in order to get an image, I want to introduce you to our first plugin of the day, and this is Unsplash. You get two plugins in the resources tool between text and hand. Then click on plugins, and I want you to search for Unsplash. Once you run it, it's just kind of a source for loads and loads of pictures, and some of them you have to pay for, but a lot of them are also free. I'm going to search for shoe, and then just select whichever shoe kind of fits your fancy. I kind of like this one. Perfect. So if I'm selecting an element and I tap on any of these images, it will just put that as a background, and you can see it over here as well. I still have this D99, but I don't need it, so I'll remove it. Now this shoe isn't really centered, so let's look at how we can manipulate this image. If I double tap into it, I'll get this kind of fill selector opened, and then I want to see, I don't want it to be filled, I want it to be cropped, so then I can see the full image. You can see there's this black line that shows me the full image, and then I'm just going to drag it a bit, again holding down my magic key Shift to make sure that it moves in a straight line. Yeah, there we go, that's perfect. Great. Now I want to have a back button and a share button at the top to be sort of my navigations. Second plugin of the day, Iconify. If I go into plugins again and I search for Iconify, there we go. So this is another resource for thousands and thousands of icons. So I'm going to search for a back, kind of like this one. I can already set the size of it, but I'm kind of fine just importing it. When you import it, it will be a vector inside of a frame. I'm just going to change the name of it to back. I'm going to give it a background color, a white background color, maybe a bit of opacity, like 80% opacity, and maybe I'll make it a circle. Yeah. Then I'll put it into here. So I know that when I'm designing an app or something that's like mobile-y, I need my touch target. So anything that you can press on to be quite big. So 40 or 44 is usually the minimum, but I feel like this arrow is really big. So I might go inside and shrink it a little bit. Another top tip for you, if you want something to shrink to the center, so if I hold it from the corner, even if I'm pressing Shift, it will shrink to the opposite corner, right? So if I do this, it will shrink up. If I do this, it will shrink down. But if I hold down Shift and Option at the same time, it will shrink to the center. So I think that size is kind of good. It is a stroke, and that kind of changed the same. So I might make it like 3. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Great. Let's do the same and get in a share icon. So top tip, because we've already used this plugin before, we don't have to go into plugins to find it. We can find it through our quick actions menu. I'm going to click on Option and slash, then I get my quick actions menu, and I'll search for Iconify. There we go. Now let's look for share. Okay, I'm going to go with this one. Fun fact, if you're an iOS user, you're more likely to go with this one. If you're an Android user, you're more likely to go with this one. little mental model there for you. I'm going to import it. Great. Now I want this frame, I'll just change the name to share. I want this frame to follow along exactly how this frame looks, right? If we put this on top here, we can see it a bit better. I want it to have the rounded corners and I want it to have the same fill color. We can copy the properties of this frame and paste them onto this frame. So top tip, we can copy the properties of this frame and paste them on top of the other frame. I'm going to use Command, Option, and C to copy the properties. Then I select my frame, Command, Option, and V, and I've pasted those properties on there. I'm going to need to do the same trick again that I did before with my share. So I don't know if you're ready for this, but another top tip. When we made it smaller before, you saw that the stroke didn't change, right? So the stroke stayed kind of fat and then we had to readjust it. What we can do instead is use our resizing tool. In order to get it, you just click on K, or you can also select it from the drop down where the pointer is. And what that does, it's kind of a scaling tool. So over here, I can make it just half the size or make it size it up to a specific width. I'm just going to do it manually, still holding down Shift and Option, but this time I'll just make it a bit smaller, and you can see that because I used the scale tool, the stroke changed, right? The stroke was on 2 point something, and if I would have just shrunk it down like I did before, that wouldn't change. But I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but stay with me. Now again, when designing for something mobile, I know that there should be some margin between the very side of the frame and whatever's inside. So let's say about 16 pixels. I'm going to select my back button and then align it all the way to the left. And then in the X position, just add 16. So I know it has 16 pixels between it and the side of the frame. I'll do the same thing for the share button to the other side. I'll select it and then align it to the right. And then in X, I'm going to minus 16. So wherever you are, take 16 pixels off to give you that spacing. Lovely. These two should probably be in the same line, shouldn't they? So I'll select both of them and align them vertically to each other. And then I think they probably should be about 40 pixels down from the top. So I'll just give them a Y of 40. Yeah, that looks perfect. Moving on, I want to create some text over here, right, to give us the price of the shoe. So I'll click on T. What am I not going to do? Thank you. I'm not going to drag. I'm going to tap. And then let's write 173.4. Yeah, let's say that is my price. I'm going to grab the pound sign from here because I can't get one on my keyboard. So let's now use our text style for before that we set for the title. Lovely. Okay. Underneath, I'm going to want some text that just says the name of the shoe. So I'm just going to copy this text box. I'll hold down Option to duplicate and then hold down Shift to drag it in a straight line. I'll change this to my body and then let's change it. Let's just write red Converse trainer. Great. I am going to align both of these to the left of each other. Then I'm going to place them again at 16. So similar to this, I want them to have the same margin as the other. What else do I need? I think that's kind of good, right? Now underneath this, I'm going to want to create a few different images that have different shoes in them. And they're going to be like other shoes that you might like. So I'll click on O, tap in, and I'm going to constrain the proportions and probably make this like 40, nah, too small, 50, 60. Yeah, 60, that's good. Place it over here. Then I want a few of these, right? So what I can do is I can duplicate, Command D, move it into where I want it to be, and then just Command D again, and that will remember what was the movement, right? So if I Command D, move something, and then Command D again, it will duplicate the next element to the same kind of movement, right? So it knows kind of where the next one should go in the space. I want you to create quite a lot of these, yeah? And then I can't see them because my shoe page is clipped. So if I select it and unclip, I can see all of my circles. Once I have quite a few of these, I'm going to select them and make sure that they are distributed horizontally. I'm going to say, let's say maybe 10 pixels between them. Great. Now I need to insert quite a lot of images into here, right? And if I do it one by one in Unsplash, it's going to take some time. So new plugin, Content Reel. If I go into my plugins and search for Content Reel, this is just like a space where you can get a few different images at the same time. So I'll go into image and search for shoe. So you've got all kinds here, yeah? If I click on here, you can see I've got gym shoes, hiking shoes, product shoes, yeah? There's everything that you can want. I kind of like this one, staying with the trainer theme. So when I click apply all, you can see just kind of put all of them in there, right? And you've got loads of things here, not just shoes. I can do like people or avatars or workers or logos or maps or whatever you want. It's really kind of, the possibilities are endless. There's also lots of text in here. So if you select multiple text boxes, you can just put in like random names. So genius. Now I see that most of these images have a grayish background. So I might add a stroke, maybe make it 0.5. Yeah, I like that. The next thing underneath is I want to have just like some descriptive text. So I'll click on T, tap in, I'll just write text. And for this, I want to select my secondary label color. Actually set these to my primary label color. Now for this, I want to just put in some dummy data. You may be familiar with lorem ipsum, which is the kind of agreed on chunk of text in Latin. I don't know if it's real Latin or fake Latin, but it's the agreed on dummy text that all designers kind of use for their fake data. So there's an amazing plugin. There's lots of plugins actually called lorem ipsum, but this is the one that I really like. It kind of has a blue background and says lorem ipsum in blue inside. You have to select a text box in order to use it. That's why we just kind of made one. I can select how much lorem ipsum I want to insert by paragraph, by character. I can auto generate according to the size of the text box. I can also put in fake data like a profile or a company or a product. I can also put in real data, but that is more of an advanced feature. But for now, I just probably need 3 paragraphs of lorem ipsum. So because we put this text in correctly, it's going to be auto width. If you click on the 3 dots, you can see the resizing over here. I do want it to be auto height though. So I'm going to put it on auto height. All I'm going to do is use some math. So we know that the width of our frame is 390, right? So I'm going to set this to 390, and then I need a margin of 16 on either side. So I'm going to say minus 16, and it's the correct size. Just make sure to center it in the frame so it has 16 on one side and 16 on the other. Now the last thing I need is an add to cart button. I need a button that actually adds this to my cart. So let's create a button. To start off, I'll click on T, tap in, and just type label. I'm going to frame this label. I'm going to right click and put a frame around this label because it's going to have a background color, right? I'm going to select my frame and I'll use my primary color as my fill. I can just go ahead and find out what shape I want this to be. So I'm going to want it to be like this big, and then I'll take my text and center it and think no, yes, no. But I am a new age designer and I like my work to be quick and I want it to be dynamic. So what do I know to always be true about this button? I don't know if it will have rounded corners. I don't know if it will be long or small, but I know one thing for sure, and that is that the text will forever be at the center of the button. If I select my text and put it on a center constraint, it means that throughout my ideation process and my creativity with this button, I know that the text will just forever stay centered. Let me change this to button. And then let's see what size we want it to be. So I'm going to put it in here. I'll actually move my text a bit further down. Just place it in the center. Let's use the same trick we used with our text box. So I want it to be 390 minus 16 minus 16. And then I'll center it. Yeah, that looks good. I'll give it some rounded corners, maybe 5. Great. Now the text inside, I want it to be add to, ooh, that's not centered anymore, is it? How can I protect myself again? How am I going to make the text box grow from the center? Just good old text alignment tools, right? So in the label text, I'm going to select center align the text. And then when I write something new in here, ta-da, it stays centered. Lovely. Great, so our page is now done. Let's move on to the next step, which is prototyping. So this is going to be our homepage when you kind of open this prototype. And I want it to be that when I click on new in, I get to this page. So let's firstly move into our prototyping panel. I can Shift E or just tap on prototype. I'll select new in and I'll add an interaction. Now this interaction is going to be on click, navigate to, and then I'll find new in. There we go. So when I hover over it, you can see it gets a blue line around it. Figma's kind of helping me to figure out which one I'm on. When I tap on it, you will get a noodle between the first page and the second page. So we have our first interaction. Let's see this happen. If I select Sunshine Shoes, kind of my first page, and I'll see I have a little flow over here, so you can click on this little button to get your prototyping preview, or you can use Shift and Space to get it as well. And let's see if it worked. If I click on New In, you see already my mouse changed. Over here's just a mouse, over here's like a tappable thing. Ta-da! We got to New In. Lovely. Now we needed to go back, right? So I can do this using the same method. I can select my arrow and then click on interaction, but I can also just drag a noodle. So if you see when I hover over this, it kind of has these plus, and if I just drag, it does connect it and automatically sets it on click, navigate to Sunshine Shoes Home. Be careful with dragging noodles, because when you just have like 3 screens in your design, yeah, it's pretty simple, but when you have loads of stuff going on, you can accidentally drag to the wrong place. If I drag a noodle and then abandon it and then drag another one, it can create a drag interaction by accident. So you can now tap and you can drag, and we don't want that, right? So let's play this again. Click on your home, Shift and Space. I click on New In. I'm in New In. I click on back. I'm in my home. Amazing. Let's make this a bit nicer though, yeah? So if I click on this noodle, let's see what I can do. So firstly, in this drop down, I can change the actual interaction. Is it click? Is it drag? Is it hover? We just want click for now, but I would really recommend to play around with all of these. Now, I don't want it to be instant. I want to give it a bit of an animation. Let's say move in from the left. So it kind of comes in. And then this one, I might change it to move out to the right. Let's have a look at that. Sunshine Home, Shift and Space. Click on New In. Click on back. I like it, yeah? Next thing, there's so many shoes here, yeah? I want to be able to see them. So let's add some scrolling behavior. If I select my frame, this New In frame, over here I have scroll behavior, and right now there's no scrolling. So let's add some vertical scrolling. If I Shift and Space just on this page, automatically I can scroll. But I don't like that this is disappearing, and I really don't like that this is scrolling with me, okay? It looks weird. So what I can do is I'll select this navigation bar, and I'll also select this tab bar, and then in my prototype panel, I can set their position. Right now they're scrolling with their parent, but I want them to be fixed. Once I set that, you will see that in the layers panel, I now have 2 sections. I have fixed and I have scrolls. So it's telling me that these will forever stay in place. If I select my frame again, Shift and Space, when I scroll now, yay! Okay, so everything is scrolling underneath it. See, the tab bar's always here, the nav bar's always here. And that's exactly what I want. Let's now connect this page. So I'm going back into design, and let's place this shoe somewhere. Okay, so maybe let's replace this one. So if I select my shoe, and I'm going to use the same copy properties that we used before. So I'm going to Command, Option, and C. And then I'll select this kind of image over here, Command, Option, and V to place that there. And I'm just going to change the price as well. So it should be 173.4. So now let's go back into prototyping, Shift and E, and I'll select my card, this kind of card number 5 over here. And then I will drag a noodle from it to my shoe page, and I'll change the animation to move in from the left. Let's set a back as well. So when you click on back, you come back to this page, move out to the right. Let's have a look. Let's go from the start. So I'll tap on this, New In, and then scroll down and click on my shoe. Yay! Now when I go back, this is where we have a little advanced thing we can do. So what happened is I kind of scrolled. You can see that this shoe is at the top. When I go in and come back, the shoe is still at the top. And this is where we can make a choice. I'm going to tap on this noodle, the one that brings me back to the page. So the one between the arrow and the page. And you can see there's reset scroll position. If I tick this, what's going to happen is that even if I scroll quite a lot, like this, say this is kind of disappeared, when I come back, it will reset the page. Yeah, and this is an option. There's no right answer here. It's whatever you want it to do. I kind of like that it resets it, to be honest. So I'm going to keep it that way. Great. Now let's see what happens if I want to scroll these, right? I can't see them. How do I do that? So you can only use scrolling inside of frames. So I'm going to select all of my shoes, right click and frame the selection. Now, if I go into prototype of this gallery of shoes, and I'm going to select an overflow horizontal scrolling, but I'm going to get an error. So that error is telling me for scrolling to work on this frame, the contents needs to be bigger than the frame. So everything is inside of the frame. So it's like, what am I going to scroll? So what I need to do is just select the side of this frame and bring it to the edge of the big frame, right? So you can see that the bounding box kind of ends here. And now the alert is gone. And when I play this page, shift and space, I can now scroll through these shoes. Amazing, right? Let's add a scroll on the whole page as well. So I'll select my shoe page, add vertical scrolling. I don't think I want anything to stick. I think I'm kind of fine. So I can scroll these, but I can also scroll up to read the rest of the text. I think that's pretty cool. Now let's add one last thing. I have this little out of stock box, and I know that I'm going to reuse it quite a lot, right? A lot of these shoes might be out of stock. So let's connect one shoe. Let's say this shoe is going to be out of stock. So what I'm going to do is add an interaction and say on click. Now, instead of navigate to, I'm going to use open overlay, and I'm going to select the out of stock overlay. Once I select that, you see I've got all these different options. So an overlay is something that kind of sits on top of our frame. So where is it going to sit? Is it going to be in the center? Is it going to be at the bottom, on the side? There's more options here. These are kind of the most used ones. So I'm going to keep it on the center. I want it to close when clicking outside and have a background. But let's see what this does. If I play this page, if I tap on this, ooh, you see, it didn't go somewhere else. It just put this little pop-up on top of my screen. So I know from other softwares, sometimes you would create the screen, put a little black rectangle with opacity and put the pop-up and just navigate to that page rather than doing this. But this way, this becomes reusable, right? I can connect multiple things to it in that way. Let's say this one's also out of stock. Maybe this one's also out of stock. Now, once it's been opened as an overlay once, you see I kind of connect the noodle there. So all of these connect it like that. So when I play this one, okay, that's out of stock. This one, oh, that's also out of stock. What about, what was the other one? Who did I connect? This one. There we go. Also out of stock. Now, you can see that it reset the scrolling position, which we don't like. So let's fix that. So I can actually select all of these noodles kind of at the same time and untick reset scroll position. And that will keep it in the same place because that was really weird. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. So overlays are super powerful and really reusable and just make your life a lot easier. Because if this design changes, you can just go and change the design and then this will stay on top of it. You don't need to worry about changing it in 5,000 different places. Now we've been looking at this prototype in a prototype preview, but if you click on just play, if I click on this and actually click on play over here, it will open it in a new tab. And this is how you will see it if you send it to someone as well to look at this prototype. Now, right now this prototype is a bit boring. It's just on a black screen and it's just a rectangle. So what I can do is change the prototype environment. If I click on the canvas, I can put it into a device. So I know that I've been using 390 by 844, so this is a device. I can change the color of the device and I can even change the background. Let's make it pink. Now when I go back into here, whoa, okay, I can click on Z to just make it fit the screen a bit better. You can see that now it just it's inside of a phone. Look, it's fully alive. Yeah, if I select the shoe that we made the page for, look at that. I can do all of these fantastic things. Go back, oh, out of stock, how sad. Yeah, so it really, really feels like a real app. Also, one super cool thing, now that it knows that we're in a phone and that we're not just in any screen, it's now going to say on tap and not on click. And that, my friends, is the end of our crash course. I know I threw so much information at you, but I hope you were able to absorb. I hope you were able to kind of play along with me and practice. Figma is a never-ending journey, so keep playing around with it. Never get discouraged. Please leave a comment below. Let me know if you've enjoyed. Let me know what other videos you like to see. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you at the next one.